All right. We'd just like to welcome everybody to the Eleos podcast. If you're new with us, Eleos is simply an ancient word that means compassion or mercy for those who are in need. And so it means we speak up for those who are disenfranchised or disregarded. It means we stand up for those who are marginalized or mistreated. And thus we just in a tangible way try to express that we are for one another and with one another. And it's in this essence of Eleos, in light of recent events with George Floyd and too many others, that we are seeking to host a series of conversations about race and injustice. And so we'll hear from various Black men and Black women about their story, their experience, with the goal of educating, empathizing, and ultimately energizing us all towards real change. And we certainly understand that these simple conversations don't mark the signal of the end of the unconscionable racism and social injustice that exists in our day, but we do believe it can be the start of something, and we can all do something. And so we hope that you'll join us for these series of enlightening conversations, and we hope it will encourage us all to a life of more Eleos. And our guest today is Wade Smith. Wade is an NFL veteran, Pro Bowler, originally from Dallas, Texas. He received a finance degree from the University of Memphis and was drafted by the Miami Dolphins. I think it was a third round in 2003 NFL draft. And in 2010, he made his way to Houston and played for the Texans, started 64 games here, and was voted to the Pro Bowl in the NFL in 2012. And that happened to be the same year that he launched the Wade Smith Foundation. And the Wade Smith Foundation supports community youth programs by focusing especially on literacy and education. If you know Wade, he feels strongly about giving back to the communities that helped him succeed. And also, in addition to his philanthropic work, he is a business owner and he's a husband to his wife, Rita, and they have 3 daughters who currently reside in Houston. And so, Wade, we just want to welcome you to our podcast, and thank you for joining us today.
Appreciate you having me. I do need to put one correction up there as far as the bio. I now have 4 daughters and not 3, so I need to update that on the website. So I can.
How old is your youngest?
She's 2.5.
She's 2.5. Right.
2.5. Yeah. So she's
good. We want to make sure everybody's included there.
Yeah, everybody's got to be accounted for. So.
Absolutely.
They might see this, my daughter might see this 5-10 years from now to be like, wait a minute, what about me, Dad?
What happened to me? Right. So, Wade, you and I have known each other for a little bit. You've been a very generous supporter of the organization that I work for and help donate a lot of money towards scholarships and helping kids primarily in the Houston area, a lot of them first in family to go to college. And so it just seemed like this would be a natural conversation for us to have in light of recent events. And in some ways, it's a very simple conversation. It's a simple format, at least. But obviously, the subject matter is not simple. And I know it's sensitive and maybe a little bit vulnerable. And so certainly appreciate you wanting to have this conversation with us and put it out to the world. We ask the same 8 questions of everybody, and it always takes a little bit of a different direction depending on how the conversation goes. Those 8 questions will kind of guide us through our time today. And you are the leader here. It's your story. It's your conversation, and I'll just help us guide our way through. So the first question we always ask is, when I say racism, you say what?
It is something that is completely interwoven to everything that you know, see, feel, and touch here in the United States of America. And especially if you are a minority in the United States of America, you will experience some form of racism in your life. And for the most part, and I can't speak for everybody, but everybody I've ever talked to about it, it happens multiple times in your life where will come across blatant racism. You'll come across prejudices, you'll come across stereotypes, you'll come across microaggressions, you'll come across some type of either conversation, action, something that will let you know kind of where you stand in another person's opinion based off of just them seeing you and assuming what you are based off of what little they know about your people per se. And so,
Yeah.
racism is something that I feel like, maybe over the past, I mean, it's 2020 now. There was a certain time period, somewhere in about 2015, 16, 17, or maybe about 2015, somewhere around there, about 4 or 5 years ago, is where I felt like that the term racism was being used way too often, because racism has a specific meaning. Stereotypes have specific meanings, prejudices have specific meanings, and I think it's kind of the in vogue thing to do, or the easy thing to do, to not do your research and actually understand the nuances between these various things, and none of them are good. Some of them are more severe than others. But when I think of racism, I just think it's part of life. You know what I mean? And that's kind of sad to say that, as a black man in America, that I grew up, that there were certain things that were going to happen to me, and um, it was what it was. You still had to figure out a way to function and to be a success. But I can remember the first time walking to school and somebody driving around in a pickup truck. I grew up in Dallas, grew up in Texas. I grew up in a neighborhood to where basically it was a diverse neighborhood as far as the kids that went to the school, but it wasn't very diverse when it went to where you lived. So like, I would say 90% of the African Americans, the black people that lived in my neighborhood, lived in apartments complexes,
Hmm.
lived in Northeast Dallas, Lake Highlands area of Dallas.
Hmm.
And so 90% of the people, and this is in I grew up, I was born in 81. And
Okay.
so from 81 until 99, I lived in Lake Highlands, some version of Lake Highlands, Texas. And it's actually not its own city, but we consider it because we're very prideful about where we're from. But
Understood.
Lake Highlands was a neighborhood where, the school, maybe the school makeup might be, 65% white and then 35% minorities. That number now is pretty close to like, 35, and then, 20 and 5, you know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
I'm gonna do my quick math. Yeah, 35 it's even more diverse now than it was then, but it was not a weird occurrence to experience racism. But me walking to school and somebody driving by in a pickup truck, yelling the N-word at me. That happened multiple times, and I'm 6, 7 years old walking to school. But it was kind of like, all right, you're always on guard, you're always aware of your situation. But that was kind of the first time it was like, oh, okay, what did
Wow.
they mean by that? You know what I mean? And then
Wow.
having to have that discussion and try to figure that out, and then having experiences like that is something that you learn to grow with and deal with, or different things that are said to you by teachers or said to you by other students that, may not be blatantly racist, but not having an understanding of what they were actually doing or what they're actually saying, and how that might make someone feel, and how it might make them feel less than.
Yeah.
And so I was one of those people that, I was a person that, and there's a lot of people like this, and I consider them exceptions to the rule, is that like a lot of times you have these racist acts, or you have these negative things that happen to you, and you internalize them and turn them into something good. You internalize them and turn them into a chip on your shoulder, to where you're going to outwork and do better than everybody else, because you say that I can't, and I'm gonna prove to you I can. But
Sure.
everybody doesn't have that mentality, and I don't think everybody should be expected to have that mentality, because not every person in the world has that mentality. Not everybody's an exception to the rule. A lot of times the people are just, there's a lot of average people in the world today. A lot of average people in this country. But the repercussions for being an average person in this country can be a lot more severe if you're coming and you're fighting with, one hand tied behind your back.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to explore there. I mean, I've got kids in that age range, kindergarten, first, second grade, who walk to school every day. And I can't imagine them being yelled at in that way, or them being looked at in that way that you described when you were a kid. I can't imagine how that shapes a young mind and a young worldview on how the world exists. And so, that's always part of our second question about, your personal experiences and kind of when you first were aware of that. But what I would be curious about now is, like, even now as a former NFL player, a business owner, a great family man, runs a foundation, does a lot of good in the community. Are there forms of racism you still experience today and recently? And can you kind of give us an insight into what that looks like?
I'll give you one example, and it's not that recent, but it was pretty recent. It was probably 3 years ago. I was doing a celebrity serve event, and this was in like a very nice restaurant in the Galleria area here in Houston. And I was a celebrity server, so I have my apron on, and there's people there that recognize me, know me just from being a Texan and stuff I do in the community. And there was an older white guy there that I'm having a conversation with one person, and he kind of grabs me by the arm and say, "Man, you a big old boy, aren't you? You know what I mean? You a big old boy." And and my first thought is, I'm a grown man. I have 3 kids at the time. I, not to go through the list of my accomplishments in life, but I haven't been a boy since, I went away to college on my own. I haven't been a boy in a really, really long time. And it took everything in me to not confront him, because where I was at, I'm at somebody else's charity event. I am me. So people know me in this city. People know that you have in the back of your mind that if I confront this the way I want to confront this, at the end of the day, it's not going to work out for me, and it's not going to work out for what I'm trying to accomplish in this city, in this community. And people might say, well, that's just one guy, that's one person. Yeah, but that's not the only time that's happened in my life. That's just one of the examples that I can think of right now, where you are an older white guy that I would say he's probably in his early 60s at the time, but I'm a 36-year-old man, and I'm being talked down to. I'm being it's almost as and I'm being treated almost in that same fashion, like a commodity, a piece of meat, something that is not human. I'm an asset, or I'm a product, or something to that effect. And that's not a good space to be in. But like I said, I caught myself, and then I also flipped that whole scenario, because at that same event, not 5-10 minutes after that, I come across a woman that is connected to an organization called the Youth Development Center. And she was so gung-ho about, Wade, you need to come to this center. You're going to fall in love with this place. I've heard about the things you do in the community. You need to come see these kids up here. And you need to take a tour. And so I took her up on her offer. Mind you, 5-10 minutes ago, I was hot. I was ready to physically hurt somebody. But not 5-10 minutes later, I'm getting told about this place, Youth Development Center. Well, fast forward over the past 3-4 years now, done a tremendous amount of work on my own at the Youth Development Center. And it's one of those things where I understanding how God works, understanding how there was something that was an adverse situation put right there in front of me, to where I could have reacted a certain way and been well within my right to react that way. But by me showing some what's the word I don't want to say restraint, but I played the situation the smartest way possible. And it ended up me being able to have this great relationship that I have with a bunch of kids that are in the 5th Ward here in Houston, and seeing the Youth Development Center go to being in a small church, like a portion of a small church in that community, moving and have its own building now, and seeing the great things that they do. throughout the community. And so, like I said, it was one of those deals where after it was over, going home and telling my wife about what happened, her understanding how mad I must have been, her being that ear to talk to and kind of communicate my feelings out, and her being there for me was awesome feeling. But her just having that understanding of that those type of things happen, you know what I mean? And when you have these conversations just talking about race and the things that people experience in life, it's very frustrating when you tell these stories, you open up and people try to discredit it, say it's a one-off situation. We're all not like this. Of course you're all not like this. But these experiences that are being communicated to you, listen to them and understand that they're genuine, because everyone that I've ever come across that looks like me has these type of stories, very similar. And it's not like we all got together and had a convention and say, hey man, this is how we're gonna play this. We're gonna trick everybody. We're gonna have everybody believing that there's racism when it doesn't exist, and we're gonna tell all these stories, and they're gonna be very similar in nature. And it's the reality of the situation. It's reality of what goes on here in the United States of America, and it's still in 2020. But that's one of many instances in the very recent future, because very recent times of where I had to deal with a situation like that. And then I had to communicate with the guy and communicate in a way to where I'm not disrespectful, but to steer myself out of the conversation because I didn't want to be around him. Because I knew, I knew that it was not going to be a productive situation if I stayed in that area.
Yeah. Well, and frankly, that was part of the impetus behind hosting these series of conversations is, as I've talked to more and more people in recent weeks, friends, colleagues, I think a lot of people don't understand how prevalent racism and these kinds of acts are and these kinds of experiences are for a lot of people every day. Like, we see the egregious things like what happened with George Floyd and so many others. But, I was on a call with some of the colleagues I had in our organization, and they were talking about, hey, we all have to have this discussion with our children before we send them out. Hey, you got to be careful that you don't look this way, you don't act this way. And if you're out with your white friends, understand you can't do everything that they do. And if you're pulled over by a cop, here's the procedures on how you can help protect yourself. And I think, the average white person that lives in the suburb doesn't have to deal with a lot of that. But more than that, they're not aware of a lot of that. And so a big part of having these discussions was to heighten the awareness that it's not just the big, giant, egregious things that we're seeing on CNN these days. It's happening everywhere in every neighborhood. And we all have a role to play in stopping it. And so part of what we're trying to do through this series of conversations is also paint a picture of success. So we want to bring awareness to the bad things that are happening, but we also want to help people understand what good things can happen and what success can look like going forward. And so one of the questions we always want to ask are, hey, can you give us examples? And you just related to one of us maybe, but are there relationships that you had, experiences that you've had with people of other races that are positive and productive and can give us a vision of what a healthy relationship and experience would look like?
Well, I would say this: I've had multiple relationships with people of all different races that have been positive experiences. A ton of them. A bunch, but a couple of relationships I would say with white people specifically. Growing up in that same neighborhood of Lake Islands, there's when you're in school, my mom was the type of person that was always working. So she worked two jobs until I made it to the NFL, and I told her, you have to stop. That was one of my kind of catalysts, is like, all right, I'm going to make it so that you can only have to work one job a day, or one job instead of having to work multiple jobs. But she stayed at work all the time. So a lot of times when I was playing sports as a kid, she couldn't make some games. She couldn't make certain, team functions. that we had going on because she was always working, trying to help provide. But we had team moms, and there's one team mom that I really always kind of look back to, somebody that was really positive influence on my life and a lot of guys like me. Her name is Jill Gunnels, and Gunnels was one my teammate. His name is Cameron Gunnels. He was the center on our team, and I played tight end back then in my smaller days. But she was one of those parents that always invited guys over to their house. She was the type of, like, if after school, I had to walk home from school every day. This is in high school. And a lot of times, if I didn't want to walk home from school, Cameron might say, like, hey, you want to come over to my house? Because walking from his house was closer to walking to my apartment than just walking from the school. So we would go over to Cameron's house after school and hang out for a couple hours, play video games, just hang out. And she treated all of the guys that came over there like they were her own kids. And you could tell that she genuinely cared about us and wanted to see us succeed in life. And you could also tell that a lot of that had to do with just who she was as a person, but her relationship with God. She used to talk to us all the time about just how God shows his love to us, and she wanting to be a reflection of that. And so she was just an awesome person through and through, just straight up and down awesome person. Used to make we'd have a snack in between, because in high school you went to school on Friday, and after school you had to stay at the locker room and to get ready to play the game on Friday nights. And so you had a period of about like 3 hours that you just had to sit around and chill. And a lot of guys didn't have the money or didn't have anybody to make, snacks or get food for them, whatever. So she would make meals for guys on the team. And like I said, our school was set up to where it was, majority white, but there was a lot of African American, a lot of Black kids there, a lot of Hispanic kids, a lot of different types of people there. But at the same time, the people that were minorities at my school stayed in apartment complexes. So a lot of times, you're just, it's a check to check type existence. So some of those things like snacks and meals and stuff like that was something that you might just, get by. We might have to get by with not having, but she kind of bridged that gap. And so I just thought she was really awesome for just the life lessons that she would explain to us and tell us. And just, she genuinely was a great person. But there's so many like that. My librarian, Mrs. Porter, back in kindergarten, she was an awesome person that helped me kind of foster my love for reading that I still have to this day now. Like, that relationship there is part of the reason why I'm still going to elementary schools to this day to talk to kids about the importance of reading and how cool it is and how it opens their mind to so many opportunities. So there's so many relationships that I could kind of point to, but those are two just off the top of my head that kind of stand out, that helped me along the way get to where I am today.
No, that's very helpful, and I think it points out a couple of things. One, we never know the impact that we're having, especially on a young kid, right? Just simple acts of kindness and love and acceptance can really help alter their self-esteem, their ego, their outlook on the world. And so
and another thing, she never communicated with us in any manner that made you feel like she felt sorry for you.
Yeah.
She communicated with you in a manner like she had expectations for her kids and she has expectations for you too. And if you made a mistake, you know what I mean, she would let you know that that's not the right way to do things, and it's very forgiving, understanding. Like I said, she tried to live a life that was Christ led, and so you could tell that it came across. But she never, and that's something I think, and I think it might be addressed a little bit in a future question. But one thing I really think was important when you look back on it is that having that type of relationship with a white person at that age and seeing how good she was to us allows you to understand that there are lots of white people like that in the world. But at the same time, she treated you in a manner of where to garner respect. It's one thing for someone to feel sorry for you. It's another thing for somebody to respect or have understanding of where you're coming from, and then wanting to celebrate that or recognize that, acknowledge that, and then govern yourself accordingly from that point. So that's one thing that I really want people to understand, is that part of, as a white person, helping out is not feeling sorry for anybody. Because I don't want you to feel sorry for me, because when you feel sorry for someone, you inherently have a very low chance of respecting them, and it's not conducive to a healthy relationship when you feel sorry for anybody. You want to be able to have respect for and a genuine empathy for someone, basically understanding where they're coming from, or trying to understand where they're coming from, and then going forward in that manner.
Sure. No, I think that's very helpful and informative. And you've mentioned certain words and phrases along the way here, and we'll let that kind of direct our conversation. But is there a spiritual component of this conversation, of this experience that we're going through in today's world, that is relevant to you?
I think when you look at it, I mean, people are talking about George Floyd and talking about the type of person he was or the type of person that he wasn't. And some people are, for whatever reasons, are accentuating some of the bad things that he did in his past. And some people are saying, he should not be the person that the black community should get behind, and then that will look the Bible's examples of people that were bad people that God like lifted up and used as an example to push forward his message. And so I don't see why George Floyd could be any different. You know what I mean? And so I think that that's something that, usually the way things works is things get really bad before things get good, and things and life, there's seasons in life. These are all word led conversations and kind of principles that you can always look to in the Bible to see and apply to your day-to-day life of what's going on.
Right.
And so, I mean, I can see a scenario where, hey, it makes sense to me that, all right, the person that ended up being the catalyst for an amazing change in a nation was not the best of people, you know what I mean, that had a past, you know what I mean, because you've seen it written about and discussed in the Bible for years and years in the past. Like, you've seen, this is not the first time this has happened. So I could see this being a scenario where, yeah, this is something very similar when you talk about George Floyd.
Yeah, and not to get overly spiritual in this conversation, but I often tell people that Jesus was a man for others and with others, meaning like he was for those who were on the margins, who were on the outside. Like, those are the people he hung out with, those are the people he chased after, kind of the religious, high and mighty guys and ladies that thought they had it all together. Man, that was not his game. That's not why he was here.
Right. There's
And
there's a
so,
line there's a line in there's an artist named Jay Electronica, and he has a line that you can cry leper names, and that is based off of a Bible verse where that's where you would find Jesus. He would be somewhere where the lepers and the outcasts, those were the people, like you mentioned, that he would use to kind of prove and show who he was and what he was about, and to talk to people about his father, and trying to get people to convert over to following God. And so, to me, it makes perfect sense why somebody that doesn't have the cleanest history would be somebody that could be a catalyst for an amazing change.
no doubt. And the reality is, none of us have a clean history, right? We
At
all
all.
got
At
stories and
all.
struggles that
Yeah.
we went through. So none of us deserve to be much of anything, if we're honest, I guess. Let's transition just for a second. And this is not always on the script, but because of your background, is there a role of athletics to play in all this? I grew up with a long athletic past. My dad was a high school coach. I don't need to tell my athletic resume here, but we've shared some of yours. And from my experience, that's a place where some of these boundaries come down, right? And so kids grow up knowing white people and black people and Hispanic people and Asian people, like, hey, I think it's Herm Edwards. So, hey, when we're all in the huddle, man, we're just trying to accomplish the same thing. We don't see color or race. We just see ability. And can you help us win this game or win this play?
Right.
So just curious, is there a role that athletics can play in healing all of this and making a change going forward?
I think it can play a huge role. I think, from my personal experience, I wouldn't have the relationships I've had, some of the experiences I've had with people from other races, if I wasn't a part of sports. I could see myself, like you mentioned, the way it is in a locker room, the way it is in the locker room, there's going to be just a variety of different people there that have a variety of different experiences, that have a different outlook on, they could look at the exact same thing, but look at it from completely different perspectives. And when you're part of a team and when you're a leader on the team, you have to figure out how your teammates operate and work in order for you to come together and be as productive as possible. And so by learning from and seeing things from other people's perspective, you become a better team, you become more successful. And that's the exact blueprint that you would need to use when you talk about racism, when you talk about different people's experiences in this country in their day-to-day lives, like figuring out, their experiences and how they came across things and how you view things, and them understanding why you view things the way you view them. Coming to an understanding is a huge deal, and sports can be a great catalyst for that, because a lot of times our sports figures and people in sports in general on the larger stage are people that are looked up to, and people will listen to them. The reason why I can go to elementary schools and talk to them about the love of reading, and them listening to me talking about elementary school kids, is not because, they like that I have a bald head and a beard. It's because, oh, he played for the Texans. I
Right.
look at the Texans on TV all the time. Now he's telling me to read a book. Oh, let me start reading a book. And so that's on the grander scale. But even on your on the smaller scale, playing youth sports, things of that nature, it forces parents from all different walks of life to come together and be around each other. That's one thing I love about, like, my daughter's playing volleyball, is I continue to be in a diverse situation, because now, and I was fortunate to grow up in a diverse situation as far as just ethnically. In my neighborhood, a lot of people don't grow up in situations like that. It's all one thing or the other. And so I'm fortunate now that I have the ability to choose where I get to bring my kids up. And so the neighborhood that I live in is very, very diverse, which I love. But then also, when I put my kids in sports, there's a tight knit feeling, or tight knit, more in your face scenario where you're learning about different people. Because going to school with somebody and being in class with them every day is not the same thing as going out on this field and running in 100-degree heat and sweating and crying and bleeding together. And then what type of camaraderie that forces and brings together. I mean, you think about the movie Remember the Titans,
Yeah.
where you're going back into the 60s, and when integration was just popping off in this country, and those guys going out there and sweating and bleeding together, and then that eventually changing, them coming to an understanding with one another, and then that eventually changing the trajectory of how that town went. And then people using that as examples from years to come of how people can come together in sports, and it affect people around them that aren't in sports. And so I think sports definitely has a huge platform and a huge opportunity, and to make a change in this country. And I think Colin Kaepernick was somebody that, was almost ahead of his time as far as this particular movement. And people are finally seeing it, like, oh, this is what he was talking about. And I think now, with so many corporate entities and big shots that are decision makers getting behind it, things can't do anything but change. And so change is good. I think change is good.
Yeah. And I totally relate to what you're saying about the athletic field. And, there's just a bond that's formed when you're on a team going through the struggles and the victories with other guys, man. It forms a bond you can't really manufacture. So, I always encourage parents, put your kids in many of those situations as you can, not just from an athletic standpoint, but from a relation standpoint and a life standpoint.
Yeah,
So,
it'll positively affect them in whatever they do for the rest of their lives.
yeah,
When they get into a corporate situation, when they get into whatever situation they get once they become adults or as they go throughout their journey, that youth sports, middle school, high school, however long that they can play, those things will have positive impacts on how they communicate with people and relate to people going forward. So I would definitely a huge proponent, a huge fan of in entering your kids in youth sports.
sure. And obviously, you're a great example of that. Your life has led you well, because in part of your athletic experiences and the lessons that it taught you. Um, we've touched on this a little bit, but just a couple more questions to get us through this conversation. What can people of other races do to help? Because I feel like a lot of people that I talk to feel a little bit paralyzed. Um, they don't want to say the wrong thing. They don't want to do the wrong thing. And some of these situations are really sensitive, right? Like, you can become a villain or a hero real quick in this kind of social media age. There was a mayor, I guess it was not too long ago, was giving a big speech about his beliefs and we should all do this together. And I guess somebody asked him or shouted out, "Are you willing to defund the police?" And he didn't give the answer they wanted, and man, and they they escorted him right out of there. And I don't know
Yeah.
what his intentions were. I don't know if that's a question he had even contemplated. I don't know
Right.
all the intricacies of that situation, but I think people are being expected to have answers and have responses and to do something. But I think a lot of people are operating in a little bit of fear, and certainly some uncertainty. So, from your perspective, are there people of other races that can do things? And what is that? What tangibly would that look like to you?
I think there's a lot of things that can be done. I think first of all, having a fear of saying the wrong thing and being painted in a certain light is a legitimate fear, and I understand where you're coming from. I think that same understanding that I'm communicating with you, I want you to have that same understanding when someone is communicating with you guys as well. So in other words, if and a lot of times, I would advise people to not necessarily get their information from social media when it comes to like tweeting it out and tweeting out questions and stuff like that. Because if you're on Twitter, Twitter in itself is a very kind of a negative platform. I mean, there's a lot of good things that you can learn from it and have fun with it, but people for the most part will allow any negative feelings and thoughts that they have out. That's the platform when they let it out. So it's not going to be as forgiving as you might like, but any people that you know, that you're friends with, that you're associated with, that you feel like you could have a conversation with, ask them questions. I think that's something that is a Black person here in America and wanting a place to be a better place. I take it upon myself that when somebody reaches out to me and they want to learn, to teach them. Now, I'm a natural teacher. That's what I love to do. When I was playing sports, I was the teacher to the guys that might have been there to take my spot. I naturally went to help and explain things because that's just my nature. But I think, take it upon yourself as a Black person to educate someone else. And if you don't have the words to educate them, point them in the right directions of things that they can watch and see and read so they can kind of have a better understanding. And then maybe they can have conversations with you later to where they don't feel as apprehensive about saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing. But I think having those conversations is huge. And if you think to yourself as a white person that I don't know any Black people that I could really talk to, think about that. You know what I mean? Like if you can't think of one person that, I could have a conversation with, like, well, okay, maybe I'm unaware with this because I inherently don't have relationships with those people. And maybe ask yourself that question of why don't I have any friends or anybody that I could talk to from another race or from a Black person that I can have a conversation with. And maybe you subconsciously are eliminating those possibilities. You know what I mean? I think when you look at race, it's going to be uncomfortable, right? And just like Black people have to understand that it is what it is, and there's certain things you're going to come across that's going to be uncomfortable, but you got to go ahead and do it anyway, because if you want to succeed in life, you're going to have to overcome those things, whether that's walking to school and somebody yelling the N word at you, or throwing slushies at you out the window, or being in your neighborhood, and if you're going by the wrong house, they'll send their dogs at you, chase you while you're on your bikes, calling you the N words, packs of little white kids like that. That was just, it's weird when I look back on it, but it's like, it just, and it's almost like when I look back on it, like, that's just what it was. That is what it is, but that's not cool at all. That's not something that you should have to experience, but it just is. Well, with you being in these uncomfortable situations, like, this just is. If you want it to be better overall, you're going to have to deal with some uncomfortable things. And it's not uncomfortable in a manner to where you might lose your life, or it's uncomfortable in a manner to where you might be, ostracized from an opportunity. It's just a conversation with somebody. I would highly advise people to have conversations with people that they know, and that can help start bridging the gap to where you can have an understanding. Because once you understand where somebody's coming from, you can now function going forward with that in mind, and you can be of help. You can be an ally in the situation. Having conversations with your kids, having conversations with your spouse, having conversations with your friends, where it's like, and I've been told this all the time, I've never been in a white circle where it's like a bunch of my white friends together, and I'm a white guy with all my white buddies, and they're making jokes about Black people, because I'm not that. They wouldn't do that around me. But I've heard this multiple times from white guys and white people that have said, yeah, I've been around a group of white people, and the tone and the conversations that are had at those times is different than what it would be if there was somebody of an opposite race there. And the negative connotations that are perpetuated or said at those times, jokes that are said at those times, like calling them out on it, it's like, nah, that's not cool. Like, I'm not going to allow you to talk about people like that, like it's okay. Because when you're in those groups and those things are said and nothing is addressed at that moment, it's basically inherently and subconsciously and maybe consciously said, with, yeah, that is okay. And so then you can easily find yourself regurgitating and saying these same things when you aren't with your circle of friends, and then it'll cause you to be in a bad situation. So, being able to call your friends on their foolishness, that's something that a white person can do to help, situation. Because it's the same thing that I tell kids all the time. They're like, if the coolest kids in school aren't bullies, there will be no bullies.
Yeah.
Like, they won't exist. If you're the coolest kids in the school and everybody wants to be like you, and somebody starts bullying somebody else, and you tell them, nah, we're not doing that, there will be no bullying in the school. So if you're one of those people that is, in your group of friends, and you're considered one of the leaders of the group of friends or whatever, and there's always a hierarchy within any type of group of people, that if you're the person that's like, nah, we're not going to do that, you might lose a friend or two. Somebody might leave from y'all's group, but everyone else will understand yeah, that's not cool. We're not going to be like that. And so I think that's something very simple that you can do on your own, that's not even interacting with Black people and being uncomfortable from that scenario, that you can do. Having conversations with your own kids in the same manner, like having those conversations with those kids, having that same thought process when you're in school and a friend of yours might say something like, nah, that's not cool. We're not doing that, because it perpetuates stereotypes. It perpetuates things that maybe you've seen on TV, but you don't actually know. I get to talking about this, and there's a lot to it. It's like, there's people that, there's white people that base the majority of their knowledge on Black people is on what they've seen on TV and what they've heard about them, because they don't have those own relationships with themselves. Because anyone that could say, well, Black people like this or Black people like that, to me, lets you know that you don't have many Black people around you, because Black people are very, very different. There's all different types of Black people. We have all different types of experiences. And so you can't paint people with a broad brush. You have to understand that there's nuance and creative differences between everybody. So just, oh man, there's a lot to it. I would just say, man, those are a few things that you can do is, having those conversations with people that you know and trust, that can kind of help you, guide you through to some of their experiences, so you can get a better understanding on how they've been able to get where they are in life and the different things they experience. Watching different documentaries and reading literature about how we got to where we are as a country can kind of help explain to you why you see, it's like, why do I always see young Black men being arrested on TV for selling drugs? Why are they selling drugs? Let's figure that out. You can start digging in deep and say, oh, okay, I understand this now. I understand where they're coming from. And then now you can function better, because you understand that for the most part, we're all the same. I mean, for the most part, we're all different, but we're all the same. We have a lot of the same wants, needs, desires in life. You just don't necessarily have the same opportunities to make those things happen. And so you figure out ways to make it happen. And it's not always the best.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in this very kind of discouraging time in our country, that is part of what is encouraging to me, is that people are more open to these kinds of conversations than they were before. People are more apt to speak up for things in their circles of friends or their neighbors when something's said that shouldn't be said or something's done that shouldn't be done.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like that whole awareness is increasing, and our willingness to actually do something about it is increasing, and I hope it continues to grow. And so, that was part of the reason for all of this, is to have these conversations, to help bring this awareness, to show people that, hey, you can have these conversations. It's yes, it can be uncomfortable, but the value far outweighs whatever risk you think there might be. And so let's start with these conversations. Let's not end with these conversations, but let's start with these conversations. And so, Wade, one of the things we always ask, are there other people kind of in your circles of influence that you feel like would be good for us to have this conversation with, perspective, stories, people that feel like, and they'd be really good in a format like this?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think it has to do with availability, if anything. I know Travis Johnson is somebody that I do a show with that I think would be and he has an interesting perspective on things, because he grew up in California, going to private school and living in a predominantly white neighborhood. And so some of the things that he's had to encounter and perspectives that he's come across is definitely unique. And so then he's also, made it to the NFL, first round draft pick, all this and that. So I think he would be good. I think, to me, somebody like Arian Foster, and I don't know how available he is, but Arian Foster is one of the most intelligent dudes I know, and he's intelligent because he does the research.
Yeah.
He's one of those dudes that's he's always trying to seek knowledge and figure things out. He's reading all the time. He's trying to feed his brain as much as possible so he can have intelligent conversations with people and push things forward in a positive way. He's blunt as hell, and he don't tell you how it is, but I think he has an interesting perspective as well, because he's African American, and I believe his mom is Hispanic. I don't know exactly what country. She might be from Mexico. I'm not sure, but he has biracial. He's biracial himself, so his experience grew up in a lower socioeconomic situation. So he has perspective that I think is good as well.
Yeah, great. No, I appreciate that. Maybe we'll start to chase some of these guys down over time. And I've communicated to you ahead of time. We always close these conversations by giving our guests an uninterrupted 8 minutes and 46 seconds to express whatever they feel like would be helpful to express. And obviously, the connotation behind the 8 minutes and 46 seconds is, the just unfathomable amount of time that police officer felt he was able to put his knee on the neck of George Floyd. It's just, you, I was telling my wife and some of my kids the other day, just think how long that actually is, and what must be coursing through your veins and your heart and your brain to be able to do something like that and choke the life out of somebody. And so we wanted to turn that negative, if we could, into some kind of spark for hope and positivity and life. And so we just wanted to give each guest, and you don't have to use it all, you can use more than that, but just as a symbolic thing, hey, 8 minutes and 46 seconds is yours to, we'll have people speak or pray or sing or be silent or whatever, man. You have the floor, and certainly appreciate you coming on today.
So for my 8 minutes and 46 seconds, I'm not going to use them per se, but what I am going to do is issue a challenge, issue a call to action that for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, each and every day, that you do something to the effect of maybe watching a documentary like The 13th, or reading a book like The New Jim Crow, or doing something and that will enhance your understanding of people around you and how you can make a difference based off of acquiring this knowledge, having a conversation with a friend for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, getting your, everybody talks about, and there's a lot of times you talk about reading 15 minutes a day to your kids is awesome to helping them become, avid readers and being able to have successes in life. It's like, okay, a call to action of for 8 minutes and 46 seconds each day, you have a conversation with your kids about kind of the topics of the day, about race, about, being, having understanding with people, understanding the people that you're around, understanding people that you're not around. That would be my call to action of just educating yourself and then figuring out ways to utilize them going forward, because each and every day you might run out of stuff to read, but you can't run out of stuff to do. You know what I mean? So for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, keeping in mind George Floyd and the fact that his life was snuffed out early by somebody that wasn't by somebody that wasn't worthy of the badge that he wore each and every day, in George Floyd's memory and for all of the people's memories that have lost their lives. But keeping that in mind when you're doing that work, because I think that the more that you do and the consistently you do it, it will change your outlook and the way that you conduct yourself. And that's how it's going to be a positive change in the future. And that's how our kids are going to, and our grandkids are going to grow up in a situation where people's lives and their races are acknowledged and they're celebrated. But they're not going to be a detriment to anybody. They're not going to be an impetus to anybody. There's not going to be something to hold anyone back. It's going to be something that, hey, yeah, that's my buddy, that's my boy. He's from here. He's Black, and I love him for that, and vice versa. That's my guy, Jason. He's a white dude, cool as hell. That's my guy. You know what I mean? And I think that that's the reason why we do this. And the reason why we're having this conversation, and I think everybody can I think everyone can have this same sentiment, is that everything we do is for the people that come behind us, our legacy, for our kids, our grandkids. And so if we can understand that by us having these conversations and doing the work and learning about one another for 8 minutes and 46 seconds every day, it's going to make a better world for our kids. I think we can all agree that that's something that we should do. So that's kind of where I am with the 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Just want to, for everyone that has lost lives to police brutality, it's not just Black lives, but it's a lot of people's lives that have been lost to police brutality, to just be with those people, to pray for them, understand that it's an unfathomable situation to lose your life to somebody that is supposed to be there to protect you and serve you, to those people that we prop up as heroes in this world, because there's a lot of police officers that are heroes in this world. There's not enough. And the same way how we talk about how if you're with your friends and they're saying these things that are negative about a certain group of people, talking about Black people and calling them on their foolishness, I think more police officers need to do the same to some of the guys that are sharing their same uniforms, because it makes them look terrible, and it takes away the trust that you might have for those guys. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. 8 minutes 46 seconds each and every day, man. Just figure out a way to do something to improve your knowledge of someone else, and to take the me out of it, and look to kind of prop up or to understand you or them or they. So eventually it'll just be about us.
Yeah, no, that's really great challenge for all of us. Is a great way to look at that time frame, and I'm hopeful that more and more people will listen to this conversation and others like it as part of their 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I'm very grateful to you for stepping into a somewhat uncomfortable situation and having a conversation like this that's going to be shared with lots of people. Giving us some insight into your world and people that you know and people like you, in the hopes of educating them. And as we say, Eleos is a very simple word. It just means compassion and mercy for others. And so we can all grow and increase in that. And I think you're going to help a lot of people do that just by sharing your story and your experiences today. So Wade, thank you very much. And
Appreciate it, Jason, man.
everybody for tuning in. And until next time, we'll see you on the Eleos podcast.